everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Get Your Popcorn. I should start off by saying, for those of you that are watching the video podcast, I am much puffier than I normally am in my face. I had broadband laser done yesterday, and so you are a bit puffy for the next day. There's some nice separation between the fat pads in my cheeks and some under eye stuff, so hopefully that'll be gone by next week. However, this is the first time I don't have prep face in a while. As you know, I'm on bikini prep for a competition, and my cheeks had totally sunken in. I didn't look like myself, and I look a little skeletal. So I have to say, I don't mind the little bit of puff back because it makes me look a little less scary in the face. Another thing for my Canadian listeners, we have an election coming up, and we have our election coming up on April 28th. Advanced voting is now closed. That was done over Easter weekend. Funnily enough, Pierre Poilievre didn't release his official platform until after advanced voting ended. Yeah, interesting move. Yeah, I can't exactly tell you how to vote. You know, it just is important that you do. Make sure you make your voice heard. Make sure you are reading the party platforms entirely. Make sure when you are voting, you are not only looking at the party platforms, but watch interviews with each of the politicians. And make sure you're looking back at, if they have been in political office for the last decade or so, what they have voted for and against. I'm not telling you how to vote again, but there's only one party that's saying disparaging things about the trans community, and there's only one party that's aligned itself with residential school deniers and genocide deniers of what happened here in Canada with the Indigenous population. And despite the Conservative Party saying that they're not going to back people like that, they definitely have on the North Island of Vancouver Island with that particular Conservative candidate. So make sure you're getting accurate information. And when you vote, if you are not wanting the Conservatives to win, make sure that you think about maybe strategically voting. I encourage everybody to vote not only with their own interests in mind, but understand as a community, we are here to support and be there for each other, because that is actually the definition of community. And, you know, we want the environment and our planet to be here for a long, long time. So please, please make an effort to vote for people that care about conservation and think climate change is real. Again, if you're very conservative, I actually don't need you to drop me a comment on why you think I'm dumb or woke. I'm good. I'm a pretty intelligent person. I have been into politics for a long, long time. I've done accurate research, and yeah, it's not the liberal media lying to me. I've looked at the party platforms. I've heard all of them speak, and I vote based on my viewpoint. So, you know, get out there in the voting booth, make your voice heard, but make sure before you make your voice heard that you have really, really looked into stuff and all of it. Everybody voting and making their voice heard, even if I don't agree with it, is what democracy is all about. So on that front, it was great to see so many people in line for advanced voting. I've never had to wait for advanced voting. Usually it's just me and like one other person in the advanced voting, but I actually had to wait in line for like 20 minutes, which I love to see. So kudos to everybody that advanced voted. And just a word of encouragement, please exercise your democratic right. It's your civil duty to vote. This is a very important election, more so than I think any other election in my lifetime. So please vote if you haven't. And if you're listening to this after the 28th, like, may the odds be ever in our favor. Okay, so just getting that off the hop. Yeah, and remember, you know, people wonder why I discuss politics on here. I've had a couple of comments, especially on the YouTube channel, about this. And you know what? Art is political. It always has and it always will be. And so I can't discuss art in cinema without also discussing politics occasionally. This week, we're doing a film called Blood Diamond. It came out in 2006. There wasn't actually a lot on production that I was able to find, which was kind of disappointing. A lot of the movies I've done so far, there's like a lot of notes and a lot of different articles and stuff on the production. I don't know if this just wasn't really a big movie. This was I saw this was shown to me in like a social sciences class I had in high school. And then again in a course I had in university. So it is used as a tool. I'm not going to go too far into the history around blood diamonds and the war in Sierra Leone. I highly recommend if you're interested to really look into it. I did look into it and I found it very hard to kind of pick through in a way that I could talk about accurately, which is a shame that, this wasn't taught. And this is something I've had to like kind of self-teach over time. So much particularly in Canadian schools on European history, obviously with the British and the French is like the primary history we learn based on those are the two groups of people that settled over here initially. So we have such a Western viewpoint of history, and we don't learn about that kind of stuff really in our schools, which is such a shame. It's so Western centric. We are very bad at looking outside of our viewpoint and our bubble. And so this isn't something I had such a basis on. For anybody that's been listening to the podcast over the last, I think we've been doing it 5 months now. Holy fuck. Crazy. I'm able to talk in depth a lot whenever I cover a World War II movie because there's so much discussion on World War II throughout my schooling, and then within books and stuff that I've read, there's just a lot more access to that information. And it's kind of drilled into your head a way earlier than some of this stuff which I've had to discover as an adult. So that is why I'm not going deep into the history of all of this, just because I feel like I'm not able to do it the kind of justice that I would like to. And it is a very important topic. So I highly encourage learning about this. Kind of in a brief summary, essentially what happened is, the British and the French and the Dutch conquered Africa, divided it up into places. They didn't give a single solitary fuck about the way that it was structured before and the way that the different tribes interacted with each other and the political constructs that the people who lived there had developed over, thousands of years. They divided it up. They decided to exploit it for its resources. Obviously, then we have the slave trade, and they controlled this area, exploited the shit out of it, and then one day pulled out after all this dividing, all this conquering, all this exploitation with no supports at all after this like level of destruction. And then this caused a lot of infighting, and the areas were not what they needed. And there's different tribes that didn't necessarily get along, and it kind of divulged into chaos. So there was rebel uprising, and then military camps, and then the trying of establishment for democracy, and all this kind of infighting. And this is all over in different areas of Africa. And then we can talk about South Africa and apartheid and the just horrendous shit that once again white people have just come in and done. Okay, guys, there's a reason people hate us. Honestly, there's a reason that we need to acknowledge what has happened, because it isn't just in one area. Like, we went out and just dispersed like a plague and just destroyed areas. And so this is kind of a discussion of some of the fallout and the continued fallout of the exploitation of these areas. This is Sierra Leone during their Civil War, and the American and the British and their exploitation of diamonds in particular. And remember, exploitation hasn't stopped. It's just shifted. These people who want to profit off it are getting smarter about how they do it. They're running offshore bank accounts. They're funding it through other things. They're sneaking in through different kinds of imports and exports. They're still making their money. They're just doing it in a way where the public isn't able to pick it up. Always remember, the West is built off the back of suffering, and we need to do better. No ifs, ands, or buts. We need to do better, and we need to undo this as much as we can. And this applies to lithium mining for our phones and our electric car batteries, and fast fashion, and the exploitation of travelers who go to places like Southeast Asia and buy things for really cheap, jack up the prices so that the locals can no longer afford to live in their own country. This is a lot of the stuff that we see with Hawaii and people traveling there, and the native Hawaiians saying, please don't come here, stop jacking up our prices. We can't afford to live in our own land. So exploitation is absolutely rampant through the world. Rampant. When I was getting engaged, and then since my husband has bought me, an anniversary ring and stuff, and I was very, very, very clear, lab grown diamond. because I do not trust that these diamond companies are not funneling diamonds through other areas and exploiting, blood diamonds and putting them in as clean diamonds. I'm not supporting that level of industry. I'm just not. I'm not getting behind it. I don't think that an engagement ring is worth that shit. I also think, I know people are really attached to engagements in the West, but it's fucking stupid. It really is, guys. Like, it's so dumb. And you've been convinced by big companies that unless your partner buys you a diamond ring, he doesn't fucking love you. And that the bigger the diamond, the more he loves you, and that he should spend 3 months' salary and yada, yada, yada. Stop letting them trick you. It's so that they can exploit you for your money and they can exploit areas for their own suffering. It's all about the Benjamins, my friends. Yeah, so that's just a little kind of brief, personal rant from me. For somebody who is married, I do find the concept to be quite stupid in all aspects. I did go into that. I don't know if you guys are reading my Reels and Tunes blog quite heavily when I talked about engagement and marriage and love in that one. I am a little bit of a Debbie Downer. I'm like proud of it, okay? Yeah, don't support this shit. Do your research. Don't buy from companies that do this. And that, again, do your research on all brands you buy from. All of them. Look into what you're buying. Make sure. And don't fucking support companies that are using child labor or exploitation and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's very important to do your own research on what you're consuming and able to do, and do your very best within your own means in order to avoid this. Like, even with like tech and stuff, like when you're upgrading and stuff, you can buy used things that are refurbished. Well, although you're not avoiding what had totally happened, you are no longer increasing demand for new, right? It's a little bit like when you're thrifting for clothing and stuff. You aren't buying new things. You aren't creating more of a demand for some of this fashion stuff that goes in and out of style. You are using what we already have, so it's not ending up in a landfill or on the beach somewhere, which is where a lot of clothes go. So, let's do our best to, reuse items and buy secondhand and really research, your companies when you are buying new. So a blood diamond, it's impossible to discuss without being exceptionally political. This is a very, very political movie. So this was started to be developed by Warner Brothers in 2004, and Charles Levitt was hired to write the script. It was kind of stuck in development hell for a couple of years, and then Paula Weinstein and Gillian Gorfield decided that the story would be more about an African farmer and an American smuggler. So I'm not really sure what the full concept was before that. It was pretty hard to tell, but that was what I could find from my research. Extensive research was done for the screenplay because they were very nervous about being sued by these diamond companies and corporations. So they had to attempt to make it is absolutely accurate as possible. Paula Weinstein then had Ed Zwick and Marshall Hershkovitz come and do rewrites for the script. And then Ed Zwick became so interested in the film, he agreed to direct. He directed other films like Glory, Legends of the Fall, and The Last Samurai. He was also a producer for the movie Shakespeare in Love. Garbage. Traffic, and I Am Sam. So casting the film, we have Leonardo DiCaprio as Danny Archer. We have Jennifer Connelly as Maddie Brown. We have Jaman Hansu. I'm so sorry for these name butcherings. As you guys know, I cannot pronounce most names. I had a hell of a time with The Godfather. So I'm so sorry. Kagaso Kiupers as Dia Vandy. We have Arnold Vosloo as Colonel Kotzi. Sorry, guys. Afrikaans is not a language that I speak, so I'm sorry. We have David Harewood as Captain Poison. We have Anthony Coleman as Cordell Brown. We have Benu Mabhina as Yasi Vandy. We have Anointi Lakola as Yonda Vandy, and Basil Wallace as Benjamin Kapani. So the film was shot in Mozambique, South Africa, and London. To quote Leonardo DiCaprio during shooting, he said, "I'll say this, forget weather-wise, condition-wise, but there was a lot of hardships for the people that live in Mozambique, and there's a lot of situations going on with poverty and AIDS and sanitary water, you name it. But the most intriguing thing I found about shooting in Mozambique was the triumph and adaptability of the human spirit. People were still filled with so much joy. They were literally dancing in the streets every night. It was an amazing thing to see. This is a narrative we see from a lot of people that have sort of privilege in their life. It's like, yeah, like money's great, but like, look how happy the poor are. I'm sure they would love to not be experience things like unsanitary water, poverty, and AIDS. I feel like that's a much better situation. Fucking millionaires. Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio has a yacht. Maybe he should be doing a little bit more for the AIDS crisis. I love me some Leo. But that's a comment from 2006, so it did not age well. It's giving Katy Perry and the Daisy in space. You know what I mean? So because this is kind of all I could find about the production, we're going to get right into the plot. So the title cards open up with Sierra Leone, 1999. Civil war rages for the control of the diamond fields. Thousands have died and millions have become refugees, none of whom have ever seen a diamond. So the film opens up with the destruction of a village, and there's a man named Solomon who's a fisherman, and he's being taken by the rebels to sift diamonds. And this is the Revolutionary United Front. This is the sort of rebel organization or militia, or, kind of, this is the sort of the people that are uprising against the military, and they're wanting the control of these diamonds and are selling them to these large corporations by any means necessary. He's separated from his family and he doesn't know where they are, where they're going, if they're alive. We then cut to Danny, who's a South African gun dealer, and he's being sent to jail for trying to sneak diamonds into Liberia under the cover of working for National Geographic and working under Colonel Kotze, who's an Afrikaans, a white Dutch settler in South Africa. You can read a lot about that if you're looking into apartheid. And they worked together during apartheid in the military in South. We cut back to Solomon, who's sifting through the river while the rebel leader yells, "There's no more master and slave here." Someone finds a diamond and tries to hide it, and he has to choose between having his hand cut off or being shot. He then tries to run away, and he's then shot in the back of the head. And I'm going to read a quote because as this is happening, we're cutting back and forth. And then we also cut to the United Nations and they're discussing blood diamonds. So I'm going to read a little bit from the script for that because I could not type it fast enough when I was watching the movie. "We propose then to prohibit the direct or indirect import of all rough diamonds from conflict zones, territory of member states. As we know, these stones are openly a small percentage of legitimate diamond industry whose trade is critical to the economies of several emerging nations, and I applaud their support of such ban." And then one of the ambassadors there says, "I'm afraid I don't have much faith in any industry's ability to police itself." And then one of the owners of the diamond company says, "I assure you, sir, we both want the same thing. These conflict stones put the legitimacy of our entire business at risk." Okay. We then cut back to Solomon, who is sifting through diamonds, and he finds this absolutely massive pink diamond. He is sort of watching the leader, Captain Poison is his name, and so he is trying not to be seen, and he slips the diamond in between his kind of big toe and his second toe, and then says he has to go to the bathroom. And so Captain Poison allows him to. He sneaks off into the bush and kind of squats down, and he starts to try to bury the diamond and is caught by Captain Poison. And just as this is happening, the military kind of swarm them, and they try to gun down as many people as possible, hitting Captain Poison in the eye, so he falls to the ground, and Solomon is able to kind of run away. And as the military swarm, he kind of puts his hand up. He says, "I'm not a rebel. I'm not a rebel. I'm a prisoner." So he is then taken to Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone, and is put into a prison alongside Danny Archer, who's been captured, and that's the South African gun runner. Captain Poison is also in the prison. And he accuses Solomon of still having the diamond. Solomon begins to scream at him and strips completely naked. And he says, "Where would I be hiding the diamond? I don't have it." And then Captain Poison is taken to the infirmary. And Danny overhears all of this, and he's given kind of the idea that he's gonna find Solomon, and he's going to convince him that they're going to smuggle this diamond. And this will be Danny's ticket out of Africa. Danny is then released because he is assisted by his connections. And once he's out on the street, he decides and he sends somebody to pay for Solomon's freedom so that he can then approach him with this idea. So Danny goes to his local bar and he kind of looks over and he sees this beautiful woman. Her name is Maddie. And he discovers through the conversation with her that she's a journalist and that she's an American. And he says, "Are you American?" And she says, "Guilty." Danny responds, "Americans usually are." And she points out that he's a white South African. And he clarifies that he's from Rhodesia, which is an unrecognized state in South Africa, which was largely right. Established from 1965 to 1979. It followed the British colony there and eventually became Zimbabwe, which Maddie points out, saying, "We call it Zimbabwe now." You know, Annie's trying to sort of explain everything to her, and he says, "TIA, this is Africa." It's kind of like a catch-all of the terrible things that happen there. So she then accuses him during their conversations of being a smuggler, and he calls himself a soldier of fortune. And he's trying to explain all of the things that, the Americans are wanting from Africa and the means in which they have to get them. And he said, in America, you call it bling bling, and here we call it bling bang. So essentially just saying, like, you want all this diamonds, this luxury, and this is what it's costing. It's bling, but we're killing each other for it. She then tries to question him about blood diamonds, and he tells her to piss off, like, get away, like, I don't want anything to do with this, because of course, like, this is Danny's, like, a legal thing that he runs, and he doesn't want to get involved. And she talks to him about a company called Vandicap, so this big diamond company, and how they're able to sell all these diamonds, that Sierra Leone is claiming they have no diamond exports, but Liberia is claiming diamond exports. However, there is no diamond mining in Liberia, meaning that they must be coming from Sierra Leone via smugglers. We then cut to Solomon, who is now free, and he's looking at refugee lists, trying to find his family. There's no reports of them. He doesn't know if they're dead or alive. We then cut to shots of his family running away from the rebels, where his son Dia is then taken by them to work under Captain Poison, who I guess has been, bought out and is now back to diamond mining. Danny then meets with Colonel I'm going to go with Kozad to discuss their smuggling weapons operation. So essentially what they do is they sell all these guns to the rebels, and then when the military wants to attack the rebels, they then assist in the military. So they're kind of taking from both sides. And then he kind of calls Danny out for doing this diamond smuggling on the side. And he said, I know you know about this blood diamond and I want to cut, because this is what you owe me for botching the last smuggling when Danny was sent to prison. And Danny, of course, doesn't want to split this. He wants to sell it to Vandicap and leave Africa forever. So Danny finds Solomon and asks him about the diamond, but Solomon denies it. Solomon's only concern is finding his family. Like, he doesn't care about this horseshit stuff. Like, Solomon is a good man and a family man, and all he cares about is getting his family. And he said he'll give his life to this. We then are cutting back and forth to Solomon's son, D. We're seeing these diamond mining camps, and this is where we start to see the radicalization of these young boys. They are children. Some of them look like 8 years old and they're teenagers, and there's brainwashing and radicalizing of them. They're inciting hatred. And this is the way radicalization happens in any context throughout history. Because what happens is economic depression. People get desperate, they get scared, and then extremist groups are able to twist that fear, find someone to blame, and then use it in order to gain power. We've seen this all throughout history with Hitler blaming the Jews. We're seeing it now with the West blaming trans people and immigrants. This is how extremists operate across the board. There's economic depression and they strike. Am I going to say that all, these diamond companies are the people to blame? White people for taking over what has happened is to blame. But child soldiers and exploiting the country further for its diamonds and killing anybody who disagrees is obviously not the way to handle that. It's just further exploiting your own people for your own gain. And that is how extremists operate. But it always starts with economic depression. look at what's happening now in history. So they're, the rebels are kind of teaching them to kill. They're blindfolding these kids and then lining up enemies. And we see Solomon's son Dia take his first life. He is distraught by this, and we see him kind of laying, on the floor. Of course, there's no beds for these kids. And he's just, blank stare, PTSD, that look, just traumatized. And Captain Poison comes and confronts him, says, you're a man now, you're a soldier, you're soldier of the revolution. And he says, I'm going to take care of you. I'm promoting you, you're captain, you have real potential. And this is, of course, what abusers do across the board, right? They make you feel special. And this is on a one-on-one level and not just like extremists as a whole, but on that inner circle, right? Like you are meant to feel special. You do these terrible things, and then you're one of the special ones. And that's how they, trick people on an individual level. We see this with all kind of abusers throughout history, whether or not that's a personal level of violence within relationships and domestic abuse. We see this with sexual exploitation and assault of both adult women and minors and adult men. But the vast majority of, sexual assault victims are women and children. So that's why I'm using that as an example. But that's the level of like, you're special. And this is why I've chosen you for this. We then cut back to Danny, who's meeting up with Maddie, and they're at a dance club and they're dancing. And Maddie's no bullshit. Like Maddie is just at everyone for her story. And she grills him about his business, and she accuses him of not caring about the people that are hurt by his business. And he says, that's the way it works here. And Danny says, you come here with your laptop computers and your malaria medicine and your little bottles of hand sanitizer, and you think you can change the outcome, huh? Let me tell you about something. You sell blood diamonds too. Maddie says, really? And Danny says, yeah. And she says, tell me, how is that? And Danny says, who do you think buys the stones that I bring out? Dreamy American girls who want a storybook wedding and a big shiny rock like the ones on the advertisements of your politically correct magazines. So please don't hear and make your judgments on me, all right? And this is what I'm saying here, guys, is like, we're obviously not being exploited on the level that these people are suffering in Africa, but we are being sold a fucking lie here in the West that this stupid rock symbol means love. This means forever. Diamonds are forever. It's all bullshit. It's all fugazi, if we're going to quote Wolf of Wall Street. It's nothing. It's an illusion. It doesn't matter. And he's right. He's right. Western girls are wanting this shit because they've been sold a lie. And this is the cost. And companies, they say they don't use blood diamonds. They say all of that stuff, but we know that that's not true. Capitalism wants money at all costs. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so we then cut away from that scene, and Danny's trying to find Solomon, and he does. And he says, I'm the one that got you out of jail, and I promised to help find your family, but you got to tell me where the diamond is. And he's trying to convince him. He said, look, like, you need me to find your family. And he says this line, without me, you're just another black man in Africa. And just as this happened, the rebels then attack where they are. And they're running away, and Solomon agrees, like, okay, like, if you can find my family, like, we'll do this. And him and Danny narrowly escape. Danny has his gun with him, and he's killing bystanders, he's killing military, he's killing rebels, anyone to get them out of their way so they can get kind of to safety and shelter. They're able to leave the town at night while the rebels are celebrating and dancing. They're lighting everything on fire. We see charred bodies. We see dead bodies of women, of children, of celebration. It is dark. It is so dark. And they're able to sneak out with the last remaining guards by pretending Solomon is RUF. And as Danny is pretending to be handcuffed behind his back, they get close enough that Danny then kills the guards, and they're able to escape. They then find Maddie, and Danny agrees to say, like, hey, I'll tell you my story. We just need help finding Solomon's family. And he tells her kind of half of the story, but doesn't give her the proof. And the half the story is that Vandy Cap uses offshore bank accounts and third-party traders to collect the diamonds, but not have it officially on record. She then kind of calls him out for using Solomon to get the diamond and for her in order to help him. And he just is like, well, everybody's going to leave with what they want. So she's able to find Solomon's family in a refugee camp in Guinea, and they fly there. And he discovers, because he finds his wife, that Dia has been stolen by the RUF. And they're on opposite sides of the fence. His wife is in the refugee camp, and he's on the outside. And so he's kind of, where's Dia? Where's Dia? He's shaking the fence. It's such a hard scene to watch, guys. This whole movie is brutally violent in a way that is so realistic. It's like, Like, you know what? It reminded me of the opening scene in Saving Private Ryan, where it's so real you feel sick. It's not overblown, and you know that, and it's just horrific. So as he's rattling the gate, the guards kind of think he's going to incite violence, and they're beating him through the fence. He's then like kind of hit with the back of guns, and Danny kind of takes him away. And then Maddie tells him that they can't get his wife and baby and daughter out because the government is holding everyone there for fear that some of them are RUF, and there's 1 million people living in this caged area. They travel back to Sierra Leone to get this diamond because that's the only way that Solomon's going to get them out. He then discusses with Danny, his son, and that, I can't believe that his son is now a child soldier. He has dreams of, helping people and becoming a doctor. Danny then discusses this with Maddie and explains that the diamond is Solomon's only way out. Danny then tells her more of the story. He tells her that the diamonds are smuggled and exported into India via wine sales, so they have something officially on the record, and then they are sold as clean diamonds. That when they get to the Vandy Cap, they are then kept in vaults as to not flood the market with them. The rebels want to get as many diamonds out as possible, but Vandy Cap knows that if there's too much supply and not enough demand, then obviously prices go down. So they are holding these all in vaults in order to artificially inflate the prices because there's more demand than supply. Danny then shows her the names and the dates and everything in his book and says he'll give her this book as proof for her story, but only after they sell the stone to Vandy Cap, in order to get the money for him and Solomon. Danny, they're then trying to get back to where they need to go, so they're then all disguising under sort of the safety of Maddie's journalism. They then say that Danny is a journalist and Solomon is his cameraman. Maddie and Solomon discuss on this bus ride her story, like her article that she's going to be writing, her story and what it all means. And Solomon says, when your people read this story, they're going to come and help us, right? And she says, probably not. And this is, something we've seen rampant, where so much discussion about the suffering of the Palestinian people, for instance, and nobody is doing anything. And it's so hard if you're an individual with absolutely no influence on the government at all. This is why I use my little platform that I have to talk about these things, because this is the only way I can think of to make my voice heard is by literally using it. We then cut back to the RUF camp where we see kids partying, we see them drinking, we see them smoking. There's lots of kind of rap music playing. It's a big party while they're also talking about inciting the violence and the same things they were talking about before, but then now they're using it under the guise of fun and drug use. This is something cult leaders use. If you look at the Manson family, for instance, this was a big tactic that he used, was preaching at people while they were on drugs, because you're so susceptible in that vulnerable moment. We see Dia shoot up and nod out from heroin. We then cut back to the trio, and they arrive in the town called Kono, and they meet up with a man who is trying to help rehabilitate former child soldiers. We see a lot of limbless child soldiers who had their hands cut off for being, either for stealing or different things as a form of punishment. There's also discussion of a policy from one of the rebel leaders that for every 100 child soldiers, you have to cut off one arm in order to maintain control. We also see several children that have that like haunted look staring off into the distance just from post-traumatic stress. And, there's a moment where Maddie says it's hard to go back to sipping lattes and talking interest rates after seeing stuff like this. And this is what I'm saying, guys, when you wander in the voting booths. Interest rates and shit matter, of course. But when you're looking at zoom fucking out, guys. Zoom out on your own perspective from your tiny hometown or whatever. Look out at the vision. Look at all the suffering in the world and look at who you're voting for these governments that are going to continue to exploit all around the world, because all they care about is money for these big companies with gas and oil and imports and exports and all this shit. And yeah, some of it matters for sure. Like, obviously we want economic stability, but at what cost? I don't know, guys. Oil and gas, if destruction to the environment is the way to do it, I don't fucking want it. If I have to alter my life in order to not damage the environment, I will do it. It should be hard to sip lattes and talk interest rates. And if it's easy, zoom the fuck out. Anyway, so then Danny then speaks to the teacher of this rehabilitation center, and his name is Benjamin. And Danny says, "You think because of your intentions are good that they're going to spare you?" And Benjamin says, "My heart has always told me that people are inherently good, My experience suggests otherwise, but what about you, Mr. Archer? In your long career as a journalist, would you say that the people are mostly good? And Danny says, no, I'd say they're just people. And Benjamin says, exactly. It's what they do that makes them good or bad. At a moment of love, even a bad man can give meaning to life. None of us knows whose path will lead us to God. And then at the end of the day, Maddie and Danny are talking. They're very clearly flirting. They like each other. That's sort of the background thing that's happening through this film. I haven't talked too much about it because they don't really find it to be that important. And they're drinking wine and they're discussing life, as you do when you drink wine. Danny explains that he was sent to the military in South Africa when he was really young, but he's been out since 1994, and that's kind of when he discussed the complexities of that war and that it's all about control and no one cares, so you might as well get you what you want out of life, which is, I think, a trap a lot of people fall into. It's losing hope and then saying, fuck it, I'm just looking out for myself. Maddie then asks him if he's planning on going back and stealing the diamond, and he won't answer her. Maddie then explains that she has some experience with all of this because her father came home from Vietnam with a lot of PTSD. And she questions him about his parents. She said, did you lose your parents? And he says, that's a polite way of putting it. Mom was raped and shot, and Dad was decapitated and hung from a hook in the barn. I was 9. Boo-hoo, right? Danny says, sometimes I wonder, will God ever forgive us for what we've done to each other? That I look around and I realize God left this place a long time ago. And I think that's the way I try to, whether or not you believe in God or a higher power or nothingness, I think at the end of the day, you want to think about, are my choices good? Am I trying to be a good person? Or am I just looking out for myself and myself alone, or my immediate circle that impacts only me? So I think that's a really important thing to think about when you go through your life. They then go the next day to go and meet up with the Colonel Cosette. And on the way, there's a bridge that's blocked by these child RUF soldiers. And they say RUF is the only one that's allowed to go over this bridge. And Danny says, drive through, just drive. They'll move out of the way, go fast. And Benjamin, because obviously his heart's in the right place and these are children and he is hoping to kind of pull as many child soldiers out of this, he rolls down the window to talk to them and he's immediately shot in the shoulder. They then drive through like Danny said, and they're able to get to the military base where he's helped. He's not fatally wounded. They meet up with Colonel Coetzee, who is working with the military and plans to strike Captain Poison's camp. Danny then sends Maddie away, and he kind of gives her the answer on whether or not he's going to steal the stone. And he's going to steal it with Solomon. Maddie wants to join, but she's not. He won't let her. He says, you got to go get to safety, go write your story. She gets out with her life, and she takes one last picture of Danny and gives him her number. Solomon and Danny then walk through the jungle to try and find the stone, and they're walking miles and miles and miles, and they're chatting. And they discuss kind of their hopes, and Solomon discusses, his love for his family and questions Danny as to why he doesn't want one. They discuss all the infighting in Africa. And Solomon says, I understand the white people want our diamonds, yes, but how can my own people do this to each other? They then eventually find the camp and approach in the dark. Solomon finds his son Dia, who has been turned by the RUF and denies who his father is. And he screams out that he's the enemy, and he's then captured by Captain Poison, who handcuffs him at gunpoint and demands he finds the diamond. He then threatens to find Solomon's family, the rest of them, while holding the machete to Dia, saying that he's going to rape his wife and his daughters and then kill Dia. And there's this great moment where Solomon looks directly at Dia, and you can just see in his eyes, like he's pleading, like, please understand what this man is. Please understand. Please remember who you are. Danny is kind of seeing this happen, and he radios to Colonel Cosette, and the military strikes, and they say overhead that they don't care that Danny and Solomon are there. They're just going to bomb everything. Solomon, during this kind of struggle, is able to get out. He finds Captain Poison and beats him to death with a shovel. Danny then sees Dia running away, and he chases him down and grabs him in order to save him. And then after this airstrike has happened, Coetzee demands that Solomon get him the diamond. He doesn't want to, but Danny then whispers his in the ear, like, we're gonna both get shot in the back of the head if you don't do this. Coetzee then grabs Dia, holds him at gunpoint, and Solomon agrees, and they go off, and he starts digging in the spot, saying he can't find it. And Cosette says, I'm going to kill you both then if you don't find it. Danny then pulls out a gun. So he shoots them first in the shoulder, and then as the guy's falling, he's, talking to him, and he says, this is Africa, and then shoots him in the head. Danny, during all of this, has then been shot kind of in the rib cage, and, they have very limited time in order to escape. Solomon finds the diamond, but is then held at gunpoint by Dia. And he says this, Dia, what are you doing? Dia, look at me. What are you doing? You are Dia Vandy of the proud Menendi tribe. You are a good boy who loves soccer and school. Your mother, oh, I'm going to try not to cry. Your mother loves you so much. She waits by the fire making plantains and the red palm oil stew, and your sister, Anda, and the new baby. The cows wait for you, and Babu, the wild dog, who minds no one but you. I know they made you do bad things, but you are not a bad boy. I am your father who loves you, and you will come home with me and be my son again. And Dia just kind of like wells up and kind of collapses into his dad. And he hears him. Oh my God. Oh, you just think of all the kids that have had to deal with shit like that, right? And then you hear people in our country bitch about shit. It doesn't fucking matter. Ugh. Okay, I'm fine. I'll be fine. Danny then gets the stone from Solomon and he radios for the helicopter. They run away to the pickup site, but Danny can't make it. It's clear he's gonna die. Danny then gives the stone back and says, "Sell it for your family. Go get them, and you could go get them, and then leave Africa." And he gives him Maddie's number and he says, "Contact Maddie when you leave the country." And he gives him his gun and he says, "If the helicopter pilot tries anything, hold this at the back of his head to get where you need to go." And then Solomon and Dia escape, and Danny calls Maddie, and they say their goodbyes as Danny looks out at his golden hour. And as he is dying, he grabs a bit of the earth, and he finally sees the beauty of Africa as he dies. Solomon then arrives in London and meets with Bandy Cap and sells the stone for a large sum of money and gets his family. He is then talks to Mandy, writes her article on the diamond trade and exposes all the criminal actions. We then cut back to the UN, and Ambassador Walker says, the third world is not a world apart, and the witness you hear today speaks on its behalf. Let us hear the voice of that world. Let us learn from that voice. Let us ignore it no more. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Solomon Vandy. And then the ending title card says, in January 2023, 40 nations signed the Kimberley Process in an effort to stem the flow of conflict diamonds. But illegal diamonds are still finding their way into the market, and it is up to the consumer to insist that the diamond is conflict-free. There are still 200,000 soldiers that are children in Africa. And this is 2006 statistic. I'm not sure what it is now in 2025. But yeah, this is a real thing. It's a real issue. And movies like this are so important because I think sometimes we're able to understand it a lot better than watching a news article about it because this really humanizes these things. So I hope everybody has a good Thursday, and remember to get out there and vote on the 28th if you're Canadian. And if you're listening to it after that, again, may the odds be ever in our favor.